What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. I figure what we could do today is sort of take a look back from the beginning of rookie minicamps up until now. So rookie minicamps, OTAs, training camp, family night, preseason, etc., and who have really been the winners of that time frame and who have been the losers of that time frame. Now, we're not going to get too far in the weeds. We could say like Dominique Daphne, clearly a loser because he's no longer on the team, and you could go in that direction, but I'm just going with players who, as of right now, as I'm recording this, are currently still on the team. Let's start with the losers first, and then we'll end positive because that's always way more fun. I never want to end on a negative note, but I did label 5 players that I thought were sort of quote unquote the losers of this period so far. And I want to be clear here. I'm always going to be in a positive vein. Like, I don't want to shred any of these players. I think there's still a lot of upside for 4 of these 5 players. And I guess I did take one person that is released already, but yeah, neither here nor there. Let's get into it. Number 1 on my list is Tyler Davis. And as you know, and as you've probably heard me talk about before, I am a believer in Tyler Davis. I think there's a lot of upside still in Tyler Davis. Now, what that means, I don't think he's ever going to be a top tier tight end. I don't even know that he's ever going to be a starting tier tight end, but I think he has some lower tier starting upside. And I think ultimately he's probably a career number 2 or number 3 tight end with some pass catching ability and upside. But he has not had a great offseason and minicamp OTAs, etc., preseason overall. And this has been a bit of a disappointment, right? Because you go from a player who, when it looked like Robert Tonyan was potentially going to be out for some significant period of time and maybe even not starting the season, we still don't know exactly where he's at. I legitimately believed that Tyler Davis could go into the season as the Packers 1A tight end. Now, we don't know where, Tonyan is, and there's still some question marks there. DeGuara isn't a true tight end. Mercedes Lewis is a blocking tight end, and there's not really any other options on the roster, which is why I believe as of today that Tyler Davis is still going to make the initial 53. But I think there was some legitimate hope. And as we've heard from all of these different coaches and GMs and everyone that was so geeked up about Tyler Davis, I was geeked up about Tyler Davis, to potentially become this guy and have maybe a Robert Tonyan-esque trajectory to tight end 1 on this roster, a position that, by the way, doesn't have a clear-cut long-term number 1. Even if Robert Tonyan comes back and performs well, he is currently in the last year of his deal. So there's a lot that we have to sort out there at the tight end position, but there was clearly some hope that Tyler Davis could take a major step to becoming that guy. And he just hasn't done that, right? If anything, you can argue that he's even taken a step back from what we saw a season ago, because I saw a player who was exhibiting confidence and a ton of effort. And even if he wasn't there as a complete player yet, you saw signs that he could become that. Now you're questioning of like, all right, is the ceiling just not that high? Like, you've got to cut out the penalties and the errors and the mistakes and the drops and the fumbles and all those sort of things. And now I think there's a much greater question mark as to whether or not he can be a contributor on this roster. And as of right now, we don't know if he's even going to make the 53. And I know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are cheering against him. And I understand that if a player doesn't play well, you don't necessarily, want to be, having that come up and rear its ugly head in the regular season. But I'm always going to be somebody that's cheering for somebody to succeed and reach their ceiling. And I hope that ends up being the case for Tyler Davis. But he hasn't exactly given anyone a ton of reason to be confident. I do think he had a really great week of practice last week. And I did think he had that nice catch along the sidelines from Jordan Love this past game. So there are some things that he is improving on. I think PFF actually had him as one of their top graded offensive players for this week. But overall, if we're judging the entirety of that period, I think Tyler Davis would have to be considered one of the losers of that entire, preseason period, I guess we'll call it. Number 2 is Devonte Wyatt. Now, Devonte Wyatt had a better game than I think, as I mentioned yesterday, when I went back and watched it the second time, it was better than what I initially thought in real time, which certainly happens from time to time. But I think if you put Devonte Wyatt's entire body of work together already, there still would be some level of disappointment. The flashes are there, the size, speed, strength, athleticism is there, but the technique, the fundamentals, the pad level, playing too high, the leverage, all of it is still a massive work in progress. And when you draft a 24-year-old defensive tackle out of the University of Georgia, coming from the SEC in the first round with a ton of hope, a ton of potential that he could come in and contribute right away, the fact that he doesn't look ready to, be a major contributor right away is in some way a disappointment. Now, yes, I get and understand, and everyone should get and understand that defensive linemen take some time. Even Kenny Clark was far from a finished product in year one. So this is going to take a little bit of time, but Kenny Clark was also age 20 at the time. Wyatt is age 24. There is a massive gap in difference in that, expected ability at those given ages. So I do think that Devonte Wyatt can still be a factor as a fifth or sixth, rotational defensive lineman. I would be surprised if he didn't have a sack or two on the season, because I just think he has that sort of athleticism, and I think he'll start figuring things out as the season goes along. But I think when he was drafted, there was this thought of like, all right, is Kenny Clark and Devonte Wyatt going to just tear up, the interior of opposing offensive lines? If Wyatt can come in and be a dude from day one, I mean, that would be a huge get for this Packers defense. Now he looks like the fifth defensive lineman, and that is a big change from maybe being the number two and being a dominant presence inside to being a rotational guy that can maybe come in from time to time and play okay. So a lot of time left for Devonte Wyatt to show his, true capabilities and what he can do for this defense. And I guarantee he's going to be needed at some point this year. There will be injuries. There will be a variety of different things that come up where Wyatt will be needed. And hopefully he's ready, because I think in this preseason, he hasn't always been ready. He hasn't exactly been exploding off the football from, at all times. And I just think he needs to play a better brand of football, that, quite frankly, we saw at Georgia that we know he's capable of. So I think it has to be at least somewhat of a disappointment so far, and that's why I would keep him in this category as well. Number 3 is the one player who is no longer on the team, but I just think, and I know it was partially injury related, but you just have to label Vernon Scott here too, right? And the reason that I say that is, and I've gone over this before, Green Bay kept him on the roster all of last season, because of his potential. And they didn't play him at all. They redshirted him. They basically played with 52 players a season ago just to hopefully pay off the potential of Vernon Scott. And then he gets his opportunity. Darnell Savage goes down. He gets to play with the starters. He's the number 3 safety, even if Savage comes back. And he looks like he's, maybe going to be able to be a contributor. And then he gets hurt, and they release him off IR with an injury settlement, which will end Vernon Scott's, career with Green Bay. And that's disappointing. And, I think there was some upside there. I thought even as a rookie, he showed what he was capable of when he got limited snaps in his rookie season. But to have that roster spot taken up for Vernon Scott all of last season and have zero payoff or zero ROI from it whatsoever has to be a level of disappointment. I feel bad for Vernon Scott, especially with the injury, but you'd have to put him in this category as well. Number 4 is Royce Newman. And this is a player that I think a lot of people were hoping would take a jump after last season, playing so many snaps, over 1,000 snaps as a starting offensive lineman a season ago, come in, put time in the weight room, add some functional strength, get a little bit better on your technique, and you should be good to go as a solid right guard. And I do feel for Royce Newman a little bit in the fact that he's had to bounce back and forth between right tackle and right guard, but he hasn't looked good at either of them. And you can make an argument that at right tackle that, it's probably going to be Elton Jenkins, that Zach Tom, I think, should even be ahead of him. You can make an argument at right guard that both Jake Hanson and Zach Tom should be ahead of him. And you've got Sean Rhyan as a player potentially, we might just talk about in a second here, that, down the road could be a starting right guard if he can figure things out. I just think that this was supposed to be Royce Newman's sort of like, all right, progression in that second year jump. And I just haven't seen it out of him, neither in practice or in the preseason games. And that right side has been bad. And I think a lot of it's unfortunately been due to Royce Newman. So I think he's going to be needed this year. I will say, I'm like 99% positive that he makes the team. But if you told me there was some shocking surprise, I don't think they're giving up on a 4th round pick that can play right guard and right tackle and has been with the number ones all, preseason, OTAs, minicamps, etc. So I can't imagine it. But like, if all of a sudden they really liked Rasheed Walker, don't want to let go of Caleb Jones, Bakhtiari and Jenkins are ready, and they feel like Jake Hanson and Zach Tom are ahead of them, maybe not a cut, but maybe they consider trading him for like a 5th or 6th round pick. I guarantee a team could use a starting guard or tackle, in Royce Newman. So it's not a, like I said, I'd be shocked if it happened, but I would leave the window slightly open that maybe just based on his play that maybe Green Bay goes in a different direction. And I just think that's been a level of disappointing as well. And then number 5, I really hope that the Packers can just get out of this 3rd round curse. And I really believe that Sean Rhyan was going to be the player to do it, but he's had a really tough time at right guard so far, which should have been his natural position. And he just looks like he's going to need time. And that's a bit disappointing, especially how Zach Tom has outplayed him. Heck, Rasheed Walker in his first game outplayed anything that, Sean Ryan's put on tape so far. So listen, if Zach Tom is a very good, NFL player like we think he can become, and if Rasheed Walker or a Caleb Jones, one of those guys can be a rotational, swing tackle, 2 or 3 years down the line, like nobody's going to care about Sean Rhyan. If you got a legit starter in Zach Tom, and if you got a 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent, developmental swing tackle, like if you missed on Sean Rhyan, who cares? Like then you just pretend that Zach Tom was the 3rd round pick and either Caleb Jones or Rasheed Walker was the 4th round pick. And, it was Sean Rhyan is the 7th round pick, if that makes you feel better. But overall, still a long ways to go for Sean Rhyan. I'm still hopeful in his long-term development, but he is far behind what I expected him to be, especially after watching him at UCLA. I think Green Bay probably was expecting more, picking him with a 3rd round pick as well. So 3rd round picks continue to struggle, continues to be an issue. Hopefully Sean Rhyan can break that trend. Hopefully Amari Rodgers and any other 3rd round pick that's still floating on the team can break the trend. But it's been a tough round for Green Bay, and Sean Rhyan hasn't exactly exhibited enough confidence for me to say that trend is broken at this point. So those, I think, are the, maybe loser is a harsh word, but like the disappointments, I would say, of this entire period. I do think there are 10 players that are the winners and that are, definitely trending in the right direction. I've talked a ton about Jordan Love, so I'm not going to try to talk about too much here. And I don't think that this game was a great game by Jordan Love in any stretch of the imagination, but he did make a handful of very impressive throws once again. But what I'll say here is a season ago at this time, Jordan Love was checking down everything to the point where you didn't know if he could throw it past 5 yards. It was that bad at times. And I tried saying those things at the time, being like, and trust me, the entire beat was like trying to not go too aggressively out against Jordan Love. There were times at the beginning to middle of training camp last year where it looked awful. I mean, it just looked really bad. Like I said, he didn't throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. It was just check down after check down after check down. There was like one really good practice, I want to say, in minicamps, and the rest was just really, really tough. And we got, I think, one game in preseason a year ago, and that didn't go great. And, we got a couple games in the regular season where, mostly meh. And there was a real chance that Jordan Love came in this offseason, looks the same, and basically it's the end of the Jordan Love era. Like if he came in and he stunk up this preseason and stunk up the training camp and everything else, like it's probably just over at that point. You're not going to give him a 5th-year option. Maybe you keep him on the team as the de facto number 2 because trying to find a backup quarterback at this point's, probably not going to happen anyway. But that would have been the end of it. I don't think there would have been anything left to do with Jordan Love. Like you keep him around and maybe things click in the future, but if it would have been 3 straight years of just poor quarterback play, you're not getting anything significant. Like maybe some team trades a 6th or 7th round pick as a flyer for him that liked him, but you're probably not, like that's probably the end of the Jordan Love experiment. Instead, he came in and he showed legitimate, real progress in a very major way. Going from checking the ball down on every single play a year ago to firing with confidence down the field into tight windows is a major development. His play action and his play action footwork is superb. His back of the end zone throws are superb. Does he need to work on his touch and accuracy on throws all throughout the field? Yes, but he just showed me going from last offseason to this offseason that there were like 3 or 4 major areas of his game, some of the hardest areas of his game, of any quarterback's game to start to master, that he really, really started to master. And that is incredibly exciting and incredibly, I guess what I'll say is like the hope is still there. Whether Jordan Love ends up being a bottom tier starter or good backup, completely busts out of the league or ends up being a Hall of Fame quarterback, all of it is still within the realm of possibility. And there's different options and varying degrees of that, but the lottery ticket is alive and well. The hope is alive and well. And the progress that he has made from last year to this year should give hope that from this year to next year, if there is a even remotely close, similar level of progress, let me just say this very clearly, look the hell out. And the NFC North teams are going to be very upset that Green Bay just went back to back from Favre to Rodgers to Love, because the level of improvement from last year to this year was astounding. So if he can do that again, like I said, there should be some real fear amongst NFC North teams and general managers that could potentially happen. Not there yet. He has a lot of work to do. He is an unfinished product, but he is still younger than Kenny Pickett, who was drafted in the first round this year. This is a player that is going to use the mentorship from Aaron Rodgers, the coaching from Tom Clements. He barely has had any time yet with Tom Clements, and it's made a huge impact. Imagine what a full year from now is going to bring, having that time with Tom Clements, still getting to observe Aaron Rodgers, still picking up on the nuances of the game and learning from Matt LaFleur and everyone else. There is a lot of developmental juice left in Jordan Love, and he has not shown any signs of slowing down with progress. It took him very slow out of the gate. Very, very, very slow. His first year showed nothing. His second year, almost nothing. And then his third year, we're starting to see, I'm trying to get it in camera here. We're starting to see like that curve, right? A little bit of an exponential growth come up out of almost nowhere. And I don't want to oversell it. I don't want to undersell it. This just is what it is to me. I don't know what he's ultimately going to become. I don't think anyone does. But if you haven't been impressed with the progress that he's made, I don't know what to tell you, because it has been very noticeable. And he has, like I said, I'm going to say it one more time, he's got a long way to go. And I don't know what he's going to become, but I love the progress that he's made, and it provides hope. And that lottery ticket is still well intact. And when Aaron Rodgers is done, whether that's this year or the next year, you still need a quarterback. And at this point, there is still a hope and a belief that could be Jordan Love. And that is a huge thing right now for the Packers, their fans, and this management and coaching staff. Number 2, Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas was awesome a season ago, but it was a one-year wonder where he had never really done anything else through the course of his career. And you just had to at least have one little inkling of wonder of like, all right, he gets this good contract. He had one good year, which consisted of about like 8 good games. Like, is it for real? Is it fool's gold? Is he going to take his, foot off the gas a little bit? He's been fantastic. He looks the part. He looks even more improved than he was a season ago. And the fact that now they're practicing him in at safety and at corner, like, he is going to bring a lot to this defense. I think it's been a fantastic camp for him, and there are no signs of him slowing down or that this was a wasted, contract or anything like that. Very, very excited about Rasul Douglas and what he's going to bring to the team this year. Number 3, Rashawn Gary. I don't know what to say. He's been dominant. Him and Jair Alexander have been, to me, the players of training camp and preseason. I don't even have Jair on this list, so we're going to talk about him with Rashawn Gary now. So Gary and Alexander both have been phenomenal. Alexander returning from injury, Gary just taking that next step in his progression. He's been much more of a leader. He's been intense. He's been all of it. He's been everything that you want out of a potential alpha top 5 edge rusher in this league. He still has to go out and prove it every Sunday, has to be that guy. But I see progress and improvement from a guy who was already insanely good a season ago, and that should also be a very scary thought. And then Jair Alexander coming back, returning from injury and looking like Jair freaking Alexander and covering guys left and right and shutting people down, that is a very good sign as well. So Gary and Jair check in at number 3/3B, 3A and 3B. Like I said, they've both had tremendous training camps. We haven't seen them in preseason, but everything else has been tremendous. Number 4, Jake Hanson. This is a player who got cut his rookie year. It showed enough to make the 53 a season ago as like a back of the roster type of guy, sort of developmental player, to potentially being a starter now. I know people are down on Jake Hanson in that right side of the offensive line. I'm more of a believer that's a little bit more Royce Newman than Jake Hanson. And I think Jake Hanson's actually overtaken Royce Newman. I don't think he's going to be a great starter, but I think he can be a fill-in guy, and I think he can compete for that number 5 offensive line spot. And if he's your 5, if it's Myers and Jenkins and Rhyan and Bakhtiari and Hanson's your 5, you're fine. You're good there. Like, he's not going to be the guy that like, oh, the offensive line's terrible because of this one guy. This is not a Byron Bell situation. He's made major improvements. His offensive line coach and Adam Stenovich and everyone else have gone out of their way to say, how much he's been improved. Matt LaFleur mentioned it, and you can see it. And like I said, his floor here is a Lucas Patrick, and that is a very valuable player to have on a cheap rookie deal still. So I've been very impressed with the progress that he's made, and he's definitely been a winner of camp as well. We got to mention Romeo Doubs. Still a lot to work on, but man, he has been the most dynamic player for the Packers this entire offseason, and he looks ready to compete from day one. They're going to have to give him playing time. He's going to have to become a playmaker. Aaron Rodgers has had great things to say about him and how they're expecting him to be better than a rookie, and that's why they're challenging him. He's been astounding, especially for a 4th-round pick, and more than deserving of being a winner on this list. Some drops, some missed blocks, some missed assignments, some poor routes, all things that he needs to clean up, but well ahead of where you would expect a rookie to be at this point, especially a 4th-round rookie out of the University of Nevada. Number 6, TJ Slaton, and I'm going to combine it with number 7, Jarran Reed. The depth of this defensive line has been the talk of the entire training camp, and I would be remiss to say how phenomenal Jarran Reed has looked all training camp long. I know people haven't had the opportunity to see him yet in games, but if he can carry that over from practice into games, he's going to be a massive addition for Green Bay. And TJ Slaton, one of the other most improved players. I think we did, have a little bit of coming back to earth with TJ Slaton in the preseason. I think there is a limit to what he may be able to bring, but I think he's still going to be a very solid rotational piece, probably as that number 4 guy. We're going to see a lot of Clark. We're going to see a lot of Reed. We're going to see a lot of Lowry. Then we're going to see a good amount of TJ Slaton and probably a little bit maybe of Wyatt, maybe of Heflin if he makes it. We'll see. But I do think TJ Slaton is notable for his improvement from where he was at a season ago. Number 8, Caleb Jones. By the time you are listening to this, who knows? Caleb Jones may have even been cut, and maybe he got claimed by another team. Maybe he ends up on the Packers practice squad. I don't know what's going to happen with Caleb Jones. But from a guy who was seemingly way too big to play in this offense to looking like a real potential developmental talent who's put some really good film out there, some tough film at times too, but for an undrafted guy, for his power and his size and his movability, there is some real potential there, and we'll see if he ends up making the 53-man roster. But to go from just a throwaway back of the roster guy to somebody who's put some really good tape and really developed in a short period of time, I had to put Caleb Jones on the list as well. Number 9 is Jack Heflin. Listen, I know that there was some buzz about Jack Heflin a season ago. I watched Jack Heflin and the minimal snaps that he got, and he didn't move very well. And it's one thing to okay, if you're going to say all right, he's just going to hold up and eat double teams and hold up at the point of attack, but you better be like a Vince Wilfork type player if you can't move and get to players on the field. But man, you go and watch him this preseason. He is moving so much better. He's holding up better at the point of attack. He's shedding blocks better. I don't know if he's going to make the team either. Maybe he gets claimed by another team by the time you're listening to this. I don't know. But he has been really, really good in training camp. He's been really, really good in preseasons. He's made plays. He's been one of their best run defenders all offseason long. And I don't know what else you do. If he doesn't make it, I just don't think he could have done anything to make it. I hope he does. He's earned it. He's deserved it. And we'll see if he can make it on the roster. But I've been really, really impressed with his play so far. And then the same thing, number 10 on my list, Isaiah McDuffie, good in special teams, good at linebacker. This could have been a situation where Isaiah McDuffie looked at the roster and was like, man, they just at the beginning of the offseason, there was no Quay Walker. You didn't know if Devonte Campbell was going to be back. And Isaiah McDuffie might have been looking at it and been like, man, all right, Chris Barnes, it could just be me and Chris Barnes, maybe Ray Wilborn. I could go out and win maybe a job here and maybe have a chance for a job. And then Devonte Campbell comes back and they draft Quay Walker and Chris Barnes was a starter for multiple seasons. And Isaiah McDuffie could have been like, all right, man, what are we doing here? I have no chance of really breaking the roster, or getting playing time or maybe even making the roster. Man, he went and he upped his game to match everyone else's, probably surpassing Chris Barnes or at least being in the conversation, and very much right there as a very solid rotational inside linebacker should they need him through the course of the season. I thought he was fantastic in preseason. Like I said earlier, along with Jordan Love, to me, one of the biggest improvements from last year to this year at training camp and in preseason at the same time. He really looks the part, and I'm excited to see what he can do. He needs to be one of the guys on special teams. He needs to be a stud for Rich Bisaccia, and I'm sure Bisaccia is excited about having him and be one of their stars. But man, if he can get on the field, I think he has the ability to make an impact and just provide some real legitimate depth at inside linebacker along with Chris Barnes behind Quay Walker and Devonte Campbell. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Just to recap really quick, the 10 trending in the right direction are that I would consider the winners of this offseason: Jordan Love, Rasul Douglas, Rashawn Gary / Jair Alexander, Jake Hanson, Romeo Doubs, TJ Slaton, Jarran Reed, Caleb Jones, Jack Heflin, and Isaiah McDuffie. The 5, not so much: Tyler Davis, Devonte Wyatt, Vernon Scott, Royce Newman, and Sean Rhyan. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate it. I'll be right back here with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.